Now we are going to see the database concepts using LibreOffice chapter 5. Okay, so let's begin with some of the basic concepts of database. Okay, first of all, DBMS. Okay, DBMS stands for Database Management System. Okay, a database management system. So let's first try to understand what is data. Okay, first basic concept is what is data. Okay, now data can be in many forms. Okay, even in your college where you're studying, okay, we will have various kinds of data that we are collecting. We'll collect student information, we'll collect student data, for instance, where do you stay, what is your phone number, okay, and we might even collect some other data, your previous record, how much have you scored in your 10th standard, how much have you scored in your 8th standard, etc. Okay, so all of these things put in one place. Okay, all these data is put into one place. Okay, now we'll understand what that one place is and why we are doing it. Okay, so this data that we are collecting, it can be in many forms. It can be facts, it can be figures, numbers, certain other details. Okay, it could also be an oral data. What does that mean, oral data? Maybe an audio file. Okay, it could be an audio file that is being collected. It could be a Word document. It could be a scanned copy. Okay, so various sorts of data are being collected. Why are we collecting these data? Why are we collecting this data? Because we want some information. Okay, data by itself does not make sense, but when we interpret that data, when we put together that data, it becomes a certain meaningful information. For instance, if I want to know how a student has been performing since their secondary, I will go through all that data that I have collected. Okay, and I can see the 8th standard record, I can see the 10th standard record, I can see the 11th standard record, and then I will know, okay, how well that student has been performing. Okay, so that is information. Okay, so information is processed data. Okay, data must be processed in a proper way to generate some useful and meaningful information. So this gives us the basis of why we are studying database. Okay, so in a database we are collecting number of related data items. Okay, we are collecting huge numbers of data items. Now these data items are again divided into four categories. Okay, these data objects, data items are divided into four categories. One is table. What is a table? Table is your usual general table, will consist of rows and columns. Okay, rows and columns. Okay, now columns will have specific data types. Columns are also referred to as field names. For instance, your columns may be roll number, student name, and the course that the student has taken, and the marks. Okay, so these can be your column names. Then comes your row, your record. So student number 1 name is Deepa Fernandez. Okay, she's taken up commerce. Okay, how much percentage has she got? Okay, so this is a record. So a combination of these rows and columns together forms a table. Now in table, each of this data that we are inserting, your roll number, your name, your the course that you have taken, everything is related. Okay, so that is why the table is a collection of related data. Okay, next is query. Okay, in simple English, query means a question that is being raised. Okay, so all this data that we are collecting in the database, we just don't want the data to remain there. We want to retrieve, we want to get that information from the database. We want to get some information from the database. I want to know how well that student has been performing, or I want to know what is the mobile number of that student. Okay, so we want to get some information. How we do that is via the query data item. Okay, the next one is form. The form in general, if you take any form that you have filled, a form is a way by which we get certain input from the user, by which we get certain information from the user. Okay, so this whatever data we are collecting, okay, it can be done in a form display format. Okay, it can be displayed in a form, the user can give input, and it can again be saved in the database. So this is another data item. And the fourth one is report. Okay, so when we have so many datas, we have the possibility of generating reports. Okay, what is report? Suppose I say I want to know among all the data that I have collected, how many students have scored 80% and above. And I want to know what is their average and what is their marks in particular subjects. Okay, then I can generate a report showing all these students, the marks they have obtained, and their final percentage. So this report is a data that is presented in a printed form. Okay, in a printable form, in a printed form. Okay, now as and when we see the examples, you can understand these data items in a better way. Okay, so anything that we do, let's suppose right now you're sitting in your home. Okay, your home was not constructed when your home was decided to be constructed. Nobody just came up and started putting up the bricks, right? Nobody's just started up putting the bricks and the cement and started making the house. No, there is a plan before that. How is the building supposed to look? Where is this room supposed to come? Where is the bathroom supposed to come? Where is the parking lot supposed to come? So there is a design that takes place even before the foundation of the building comes in, right? So similarly, in a database, nobody starts creating tables and doing that. No, what comes first is the design. Okay, and the design is referred to as the model. Okay, so a data model is the internal structure of the database which describes the way of storing and retrieving data, how the data has to be stored so that the retrieval is going to be easy, so that getting the data is going to be easier for us. Okay, so that is data model. Now, what is relational data model? Okay, there are many types of data model, but in relational data model, what happens is everything is viewed in terms of relationships. Okay, within a table, each data is related. Okay, and among tables also there are relationships. For instance, I might have a student table and I might have a marks table. Okay, for simpler depiction of the data, I can do this, and then I can relate this student table to the marks table and create a link. Okay, so the relationship can be formed and I can then retrieve my data, my information, required information. Okay, so relational data model is one of the simpler, very simple to understand and to manipulate. It is very popular and it is based on the relationships, okay, within the table and between the tables. So database management system that is based on relational data model is called RDBMS. What does that mean? Relational database management system. Now we are going to study about LibreBase. Okay, now LibreBase is part of your LibreOffice. Okay, that is part of that runs on the Unix platform, the Unix operating system. Okay, in that platform, Base is a software, it is a database management system software. Okay, and if in your exam, in your tests, a question comes like, what is an example of relational database management system software, you have to write Base. Okay, so as Base is this software, it has the collection of all the data objects that we have seen in the database. Tables will be present, forms, queries, reports. Okay, now let's understand table. Okay, table is the first basic unit of storing data on the database. Okay, and tables are organized in terms of columns and forms. Now we will understand what these columns contain, what the rows contain. Okay, now even before we create the table, we have to first decide the entity. Okay, we have to first decide the entity. What is an entity? Entity is a real object. Okay, a real time object. Okay, for instance, student is an entity. Okay, so if I say students is an entity, what are the related fields that will come for that student? That becomes the columns in the table. Let's see the example and we'll understand that better. Yes, an entity has collection of attributes associated with it. So even student will have certain properties associated to it. Properties are nothing but attributes. Now these attributes, they form the fields, the columns in the table. Okay, now if you see this example, okay, the student is the entity. Okay, the roll number, name, address, standard, date of birth, all of these form the attributes. Okay, now attributes of an entity, they're stored in the form of columns. Okay, so these columns, roll number, name, address, standard, date of birth, these form the columns. Okay, and the information that is stored under each column forms a row. Yeah, this is the row 1701, Vinay Nayak, Shubh Labh, 12 standard. This is a row. Okay, so the another name for row is record or tuple. Okay, another name for the row is record or tuple. Okay, so this is how the data is being stored in the table. What is a data type? Now we saw we are using so many different data. We were using roll number, we are using name, address, standard. So what is the data type? The type of data that we want to save under a particular column, or in other words, the type of data that we want to save under the particular field. Okay, so what data types are present? Let's see this. Integer. Okay, integer. Okay, now integer, what happens? The most commonly used data type. Okay, it is integer. Now if you club the other integers, there's one tiny integer. That's integer in general, it means a whole number. Okay, without decimal points, a whole number. A number could be positive and negative for it to be an integer. Okay, integer can have positive whole numbers and negative whole numbers. Now here if we see the second one, tiny integer, it stores a small integer. Okay, then there's something called a small integer which stores integer. Then there is a big integer which stores a big whooping whole number, which is rarely used. Some big values you have to put for an integer, we can use the big int. Now from the user perspective, there's not much changing here. Okay, but from the database perspective, all of these things matter because each of these data types are going to require a memory space. Okay, so the smallest, the tiny int will take a small memory space. A small int will take a little higher than the tiny int. Okay, memory space. Then comes the integer, and then big int, since it's got a whooping whole number, it's a big number, it will take more memory space. Okay, so those are our integer data types. Okay, whole numbers. Now if we want to save decimal points, suppose I have to calculate the percentage, we usually have two decimal points followed by the decimal, right? So that's a decimal, so then I'll use float. Okay, I can use float. Suppose I have a decimal that's going to use even more numbers than float, okay, a bigger decimal point, then I use double, then I can use the double data type. Okay, now in some cases we have decimal points with some extra information. Let's say we are going to save some values like weight, you know, so kilograms will come in, or maybe you're saving something in liters. Okay, so those added extra information can be saved in the data type real. Okay, those type of data, like you're saving weight, okay, 15 kgs, 12 kgs, etc., they can be provided with real data type. Okay, next comes our text data type. Okay, in text data type, if we see here, there's something called as char, there is varchar, and there is varchar ignore case. Okay, so in text fixed char, it means that there will be a fixed memory space for the data that is being entered. Okay, in varchar, okay, the amount of data that has been entered will be provided a memory space. So suppose my text varchar is having a 10 length, but I entered only 4 alphabets. Okay, I occupied only 4 out of that 10 space, only 4 will be taken in my memory space. Okay, then there's something called as ignore case. We will ignore the, it will not take that capital or small letters, it will ignore it. Okay, insensitive version of the text. Okay, it will not take the capital letters and the small letters, it's going to ignore the case and save the data that has been provided. Then there's something called as memo. Okay, sometimes we have a comment section, we have a feedback section, and there's a large amount of data that the user can enter. Okay, that time we use the memo data type. Okay, the next one is yes or no. That's a Boolean data type. Okay, yes or no saves only 2 values. Okay, some types of data require this kind of values to be stored, either yes or no. Okay, that time we use the Boolean data type. Okay, then we have date data type for the date format, month, date, y, month, date, year. There's a time data type which stores the time in hours, minutes, and seconds. There's a date time, we can use also a combination of date and time. Okay, and there is an other data type. This other data types, it saves some Java code. Okay, so some Java object code is saved here. Okay, the next one, the instruction given here in the notes section is that when we are not going to use the fields that are entered, let's say I'm entering a roll number. Okay, now it is up to me whether I use a numeric data type or I use a text data type. In text I can also enter numbers. Okay, now it's a good rule of thumb that if we are not going to use the entered value in any numeric calculation, then we'll use the text data type. Okay, because if we are not going to use the numbers for calculation, it just becomes a storing value. So in those cases, it is best to use text data type. Okay, now binary data type. Now the data that cannot be saved in your numeric format and it cannot be saved in your textual format will then be saved in the binary. Okay, now again the same way, there is a fixed binary, there is a variable binary, and there's a long binary. Okay, which depends on the memory space that we want to allot for that particular data. Okay, now usually it is the audio files, the video files, the attachments. Okay, these get saved, the image files, these get saved in our binary data type. Okay, so these are your various data types given in your chapter. Okay, data model. Okay, data model will be in the next section of our presentation. We will not go into data model right now. Okay, so here ends your first presentation of understanding the database. Thank you very much.